Hey everyone, it's Mike from Air Raid Attack Podcast. Let me talk to you for just 1 minute. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain to you in 5 simple steps. Number 1, it's free. Number 2, there is creation tools that will allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Number 3, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Number 4, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Number 5, it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So, how do you sign up? It's simple. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Enjoy the show. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Air Raid Attack Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and as always, it's a pleasure talking sports with you. Tonight, it's a great honor to have a special guest with us. Before we introduce our guest, always remember to subscribe on iTunes and Google Podcasts, follow the show on Twitter at airraid_podcast, and listen to us on Amazon Music. But as always, it's a pleasure having a special guest, and this one is a good buddy of mine. His name is Tanner Lee. He's the host of the Tan and J-Man Show, also the host of the Boiler Break Pod. He's also a contributor for Orange Weekly, and he's a big-time Broncos fan and a Purdue Boilermaker fan. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Tanner Lee to the show. Tanner, welcome to the Air Raid Attack Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Michael, and great job with the introduction. You hit everything right on the head, so I don't really have to add too much.
Well, I'm glad that I was able to at least knock it out for you. A little about yourself, tell the crowd, what do we start off with college football? Of course, that's about the biggest, I think, questions of the day that I've gotten on Twitter. But Big Ten, of course, starts this weekend. Your thoughts on the Big Ten season, and especially Purdue's season. What should we expect to see out of Purdue this year?
Sure, absolutely. Be more than happy to cover that. I've lived in the heart of Big Ten country here in Indiana, grown up a Purdue fan my whole life, graduated from Purdue, season ticket holder. Unfortunately, of course, with the Big Ten and not allowing fans outside of families to go to games, I won't be able to go to a game this year. But I'm excited. They're finally kicking things off. I think they should have started a few weeks earlier, in my opinion, but it's all right. Better late than never, I guess. But I look for, of course, Ohio State to be the favorite, the front runner in the Big Ten. I think that's pretty clear across the board. I would honestly be surprised if they lost a game until the college football playoff, assuming they make that if they go undefeated. But I think Penn State and Michigan will also be really good in the East. And I actually think Indiana, painful enough for me to say, but I think Indiana will be pretty good. But they do have the hard part of the schedule there. And then I think Maryland, Michigan State, and Rutgers are going to be the 3 behind them in the East. But then you look at the West, and I still think Wisconsin's probably the favorite in the West. They've won the West for the last handful of years. But Minnesota should be pretty solid. Tanner Morgan's probably the second-best quarterback in the Big Ten, returning behind Justin Fields. Bateman's coming back, which was huge for them. He, along with Boilermakers wide receiver Rondell Moore, I think are the best 2 wide receivers in the Big Ten. I think Purdue can be right up there. I think Purdue's going to be really explosive on offense. Sure, we went 4-8 last year, but I mean, we were just so banged up across the board. Ended up having to play a ton of freshmen, which at one time Purdue had 18 touchdowns scored in a row, and they were all by freshmen, which is a pretty crazy accomplishment. But it will be tough this weekend without head coach Jeff Brom, who cannot coach this week due to testing positive for COVID-19. And I did hear today there's a few banged-up players, about 5 to 6, who won't play this weekend. But I think this offense is going to score a lot of points this year. You got, like I said, Rondell Moore coming back, who was a consensus All-American his freshman year. Only played 4 games last year due to a hamstring injury. But you got David Bell returning for his sophomore year. He was the Big Ten freshman of the year last year. And they got a lot of other young freshmen and sophomore wide receivers who will contribute. Big question is who's going to be the quarterback. We don't really know until Saturday. It could be a returning redshirt sophomore Jack Plummer. It could be a walk-on Aiden O'Connell who filled in for Jack the last 4 games after Jack went down last year. Or it could be not graduate transfer, just transfer from UCLA, Austin Burton. I think all 3 of those guys are in the mix. So it's going to come down to quarterback play and offensive line play, but I think this Purdue team will score a lot of points. On the defense side of the ball, Bob Diaco is the new defense coordinator coming from Louisiana Tech. He's had many other stops, including being a head coach at UConn, defense coordinator at Nebraska, at Notre Dame, at Cincinnati. So he's a veteran defense coordinator, anxious to see what type of defense he runs. I think it'll be a mix of a 4-3 and a 3-4. But, of course, Lorenzo Neal's coming back this year. He missed all of last year with an ACL injury. That'll be huge for the Boilers' defensive line. And then George Karlaftis, who had an outstanding freshman season last year, should build upon that in a sophomore year. So really, I think it's going to come down to how the defense can play. But I look for them to be right up there, continuing for the West title. And then I think Iowa will be right there behind them. And then I think you'll have Northwestern, Nebraska, and Illinois rounding out the final 3. But very excited that Big Ten football's finally here.
Absolutely. And, again, I'm literally right dab in Big 12 country. Of course, I follow more Big 12 than I do probably the rest of the remaining of the conferences. Mm-hmm. But the Big Ten I got respect for. Of course, every time Oklahoma has lost this year, I've been trolled by a Michigan fan, which is pretty interesting. But I guess the comments I made about Michigan losing an FCS team, of course, Appalachian State back in 2005. So I guess he's still a little hurt from that, but that's understandable.
Well, Michigan fans are just a little hurt that they can't beat Ohio State. It's been about 10 years in a row. So trust me, you're not alone there with Michigan fans getting on you about stuff.
Coach Harbaugh, let's stay in Big Ten. Coach Harbaugh, of course, done for the most part were decent at Michigan. Mm-hmm. I'm sure their expectation probably wasn't to their expectations. For the factor of obviously winless against Ohio State, is this do or die for Coach Harbaugh this year?
I think he's probably safe this year, but if they lose a couple games, including that one against Ohio State and Columbus yet again, I think his seat finally does get warm. For some reason, Michigan fans are pretty happy with the way their team is going, but if I'm a Michigan fan, I got to have a little higher expectations, especially when it comes against Ohio State. Like I mentioned, they haven't beat them in 9 or 10 years. So,
absolutely.
And you're paying him big bucks. So I got to think if they don't produce this year, his seat's going to get a little warm.
Of course, I heard it down here and talk of our local sports radio, and it's actually a good question, and it's not one just predominantly towards the Big Ten. It actually goes towards the Pac-12 that's later going to start here in the next week or two. What maybe, and you may know, fill us in on this, what's going to happen? Let's just say, for example, down here in Big 12, Baylor's the one that's practically getting canceled week in and week out because of that X amount of players out because of COVID-19. Mm-hmm. What's the Big Ten going to do in that aspect, knowing that there's practically a short window from now to the end of the season, which is, I think, roughly middle of December? How are they going to cancel, postpone, reschedule? Any ideas on that?
Well, that is a fantastic question because I don't know myself. They left themselves no breathing room. It is 9 straight weeks, including championship week, from this weekend on through middle of December. Excuse me. And, so if a team comes down with it and can't play, they might have to forfeit because they didn't leave themselves any bye weeks or anything where they can reschedule or push anything back. It's 9 straight weeks, gun-ho from beginning to end. So that's a fantastic question. That's the one I know a lot of fans of Big Ten country are interested because, I do know the Big Ten has really, really strict safety procedures going on in comparison to all the other conferences. Not that the other conferences aren't doing a good job, but the Big Ten is making sure their guys are getting tested every single day. And if a player tests positive in the Big Ten, they have to quarantine for 21 days, not just the 10. So if a player tests positive, they're going to miss 3 games, which is a huge part of your short season. Whereas the coaches, for instance, Purdue's head coach Jeff Brom, test positive, they're still following the CDC guidelines for coaches, and they only have to quarantine for 10 days. So the reasoning for the players quarantining for 21 days is not only for COVID, but also the concerns of the heart issues that earlier this year, some of the college age athletes were showing signs of when they got positive COVID tests. So it's going to be really interesting. That's a good question. I wish I had a better answer for you. But right now, I think the Big Ten, Kevin Warren and company better just hope and pray they don't run into that situation.
Absolutely, and trust me, I'm excited for the fact that the Big Ten is back, because it's means more games than our usual Big 12 1 week. And SEC, of course, the SEC I think is everybody's top tier. Staying in the Big Ten, of course, my dad's a Nebraska Cornhusker. Us down here in the country, we're familiar with Nebraska. Of course, during the off season, they are prior to, I guess, however you want to look at it. Nebraska, of course, was not in favor of postponing at the time, canceling the 2020 season. And, of course, they wanted to see the play out. Now, of course, numerous teams, Nebraska, I've heard Iowa, I think Ohio State, Michigan. I might be missing a few teams out. Was that a legit option that Nebraska and all these other teams that you know of, could they have played elsewhere for one season, or was it more towards the TV contracts that you know of that kept them not playing until up to now?
I think it was more of the contracts. I mean, I think they definitely looked into the possibility if they need to do so, but legally and with the contracts and everything involved, I don't think they could have done that. And I just see no way that Kevin Warren would have signed off a waiver for any of those teams to go join another conference for 1 year only, like Notre Dame was able to with the ACC. I could be wrong, but I don't think there was any way he was going to let that happen. Honestly, when you were going down this road with Nebraska, I thought you were going to bring up how they were Scott Frost and players were talking about how they would play anybody, anywhere. And then once the schedule came out and they were heading to Columbus and then Wisconsin week 2, they were all crying. So I thought that's where we were heading with this topic.
I was going to slowly get there. Nebraska, of course, like you said, opens up with Ohio State. Then they get Wisconsin, more than likely going 0-2. I don't see how, even though Martinez is his quarterback, as much as I don't think he wants to be Martinez to be the quarterback, but I guess for this year. Scott Frost, phenomenal job at Central Florida, of course, alumni of Nebraska. How much longer does Nebraska, and of course, I follow Nebraska just for the simple fact that my dad's, that's his team, so on and so forth. How much longer, I guess that's a good way to put it, till Scott Frost's hot seat starts to get a little warm?
Well, I was talking with a buddy of mine that's a Nebraska fan the other day, and he thinks he still gets a pass this year no matter what happens, just because of the circumstances that is 2020 and the short year. But he said next year, assuming we have a full season and everything next year, 12 games, if he doesn't win at least 8 next year, he thinks his seat gets pretty warm. And I got to think they still got to show something this year, even though it's a short season. I don't think he can afford to go 2-6 in the 8 games, or I guess it's 9 games, 2-7, 3-6. I think the fan base will get pretty impatient with that after 3 years and not really showing any huge positive results or progress, because they welcomed their golden boy home with open arms after his great run at UCF, but it doesn't really help him right now that Josh Heupel's doing a really good job at UCF too. So you kind of start to wonder, was it Scott Frost, or was it just kind of the culture set there with the talented players? I'm not really sure, but Nebraska's been an interesting team for every other fan base outside of Nebraska to entertain coming into the Big Ten. They've definitely added some entertainment for sure.
And of course, you're actually my true Big Ten person I'm actually talking to since practically the Big 12 was disbanded. Nebraska and Maryland and Rutgers went into the Big Ten. Was Nebraska? Do you think the Big Ten? I shouldn't say regret. That's really bad. I get why Nebraska and everybody left, because Texas with their Texas Longhorn network, and the Big 12 practically not having their own network like the Big Ten and the Pac-12, the ACC, and the SEC does. Besides all of that, do you still think the Big Ten did the right decision in getting Nebraska? Of course, since Nebraska went into the Big Ten, Nebraska's football program has absolutely fell off the face of the earth. Any chance they kind of like, crap, we shouldn't have done this? Or do you think that, like, hey, we still take the Nebraska even though the history is no longer practically there?
I still think they're glad they added them just because of the prestige in the brand of the history of Nebraska football, especially in the '90s. But I will be honest, I don't think the marriage has gone as smoothly for either Nebraska or the Big Ten like they had hoped for. They hoped it would. I think the Big Ten thought they were getting Nebraska, who at the time was contending for Big 12 titles, and they thought they'd come in right away and contend for some Big Ten titles, and it just hasn't really happened. And on the flip side, I think Nebraska, hasn't been all that happy with some of the decision making of the Big Ten, et cetera. But that's a good question. I think there's probably certainly days that the higher ups in the Big Ten kind of regret adding them. But overall, I think if they had to do it again, they would, especially with the day and age that we keep seeing more conferences expand.
Absolutely. And again, Nebraska, not knocking. Of course, Nebraska comes to Norman, I believe, next year. And I'm actually looking forward to, assuming, not to get ahead of ourselves, that we actually have a full season. And maybe by then COVID will be gone and so on and so forth. But we look at the Big Ten and, of course, the expansion, the expansion's kind of quieted down. But down the road, do you think the Big Ten eventually expands one or two more teams? I know Oklahoma's been mentioned, leaving the Big 12 once that TV contract expires. In the SEC, the Pac-12, and the Big Tens, of course, they're big options. Do you see the Big Ten expanding in the near, let's say, within the next 10 years, or do you think they're pretty solid with where they're at?
I think they're pretty solid on where they're at with 14, unless a team like Oklahoma. If Oklahoma comes available and says, hey, we're interested in joining your conference, you take Oklahoma. No questions asked.
Right.
But I think they're pretty set with 14. It's interesting because years ago when they were at 11, there had always been rumors of expanding to 12 or to even try to get to 14 at the time before Nebraska even joined. The teams that were always thrown around that I heard was Missouri, who, of course, it would have made sense geologically, but they end up going to the SEC, and Pittsburgh was another one that was always thrown around. And Notre Dame's always the one that is thrown around, but then, of course, which would make almost too much sense. But the problem is they joined the ACC, and then their football, they don't want to join a conference because they'll lose the NBC TV right, which pays them a ton of money, which I understand, but I would love to see Notre Dame football get in the Big Ten. I just don't see that happening as long as their partnership with NBC is still strong. But I think for the next decade or so, we're probably pretty safe at 14 teams in the Big Ten, which I'm still not keen on the Rutgers edition. But even though their basketball program last year was good and should be good again this year, and Greg Schiano might be able to get their football program going back on track a little bit like it was previously when he was there from 2001 to 2011. But I do understand why they wanted to add Maryland and Rutgers specifically for the Washington, D.C. and New York City market. Total business sense, but it's still, for a long time, at least since Rutgers has joined, it's been like, really? We couldn't got anybody. We couldn't got Syracuse or something. But yeah, I think for the foreseeable future, 14 is the number they're going to stick up.
I would agree on that. I think if there was to expand, I'm thinking probably maybe, I don't know, the Pac-12 or I don't know. I think the SEC, even at 14 where they're at right now, I think they're pretty solid. I mean, they got a phenomenal conference. Let's be honest with that. But
yeah, they do.
They're just top to bottom strength. A question strictly for the Big Ten I got on Twitter from the far end of the bench podcast. Can the Big Ten make the playoff without an undefeated conference champion?
That's a good question. I think it just all depends on how many other undefeated teams are out there. I mean, it's pretty safe to say I think Clemson and Alabama are going to go undefeated. So I think there's two. I just don't see anybody upsetting them. Notre Dame's going to lose to Clemson, and it wouldn't shock me if they fall to their road trip to North Carolina. So I don't see them making the playoff. Oklahoma State's an interesting one to watch. I mean, I know you're more tuned into the Big 12 than I am, but they're an interesting one. They seem to play up and down to their competition a lot, but they're getting wins. I mean, if they go undefeated, you got to put them in there. But say those are the only three undefeated teams in the Big Ten. Ohio State is one loss. I could see Ohio State getting in. It kind of just depends. If it's Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State, and they're all one of those three is one loss, and there's only three undefeated teams, and they end up winning the Big Ten title, the Big Ten championship game, I think they could get in. But where it becomes interesting is if you have a one-loss Big Ten team and then you have a undefeated Pac-12 team, even though they're playing a very shortened season, that's where it's going to become really interesting.
And something I kind of was hoping to grab somebody on, and you came at the right time. Let's just say, for example, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, heck, even the Big 12. I mean, the Big 12, we've been having issues with COVID-19, games being canceled, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Could we easily see a team from, let's say, even Oklahoma State for that matter, let's just throw Oklahoma State in there, from the Pac-12, from the Big 10, from the Big 12, could we see a team potentially make the playoff or finish the season with 8 games played? Even less than that, depends on how many games are canceled or postponed.
Yeah, that's a great question because, this virus, like we know, can hit anybody at any time, and you can be as safe as you want. So a team can, it's usually not their faults that they're getting games canceled due to COVID. So that's a really interesting question. But I got to think the committee's got to look for the teams who, luck was the teams that had luck on their side to play a full schedule first. Look at Florida right now. I know they already got one loss, but this is 2 weeks in a row now. They're not going to be able to play. Got to think that's going to hurt their chances. And they got a good chance to win their division in the SEC. So that's a really good question. I got to think they'll look for the teams who have played a full schedule first, but that could definitely be a scenario they run into.
Yeah, because, my dad asked me that, I think it was last night. And I'm like, you know what? I have no idea.
That's a great question.
I said, I really don't know what's going to happen if, assuming, like, say, in Ohio State or even Wisconsin was to be undefeated or even, one loss, but yet they play, let's say, 7 games or 6 games or whatever the case may be. So I was like, well, I really don't know. I don't know how that's going to work. Like you said, I would imagine going full schedule. I would imagine first and then going from there. But I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I'm glad you and I don't have to make those decisions. Those sound like fun decisions to make, to be honest.
Another question that should be an interesting conversation. Jimmy Palato, I hope I'm butchering his last name wrong. But asked if the Big Ten, now we're going off of the scenario. Clemson goes undefeated, Alabama goes undefeated, and rightfully so. Those two teams are far from everybody else at the moment.
Yes.
If the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 champions all finish the season not undefeated, who makes the playoff?
So you get 2 spots out of those 3?
Let's see. I believe so. Yes, sir.
I think Big 10, Big 12. I just think they're the better conferences over the Pac-12. As long as if all 3 champions have 1 loss. I guess Oregon's probably going to be the most talented team in the Pac-12, I presume, this year. I haven't studied up a lot on the Pac-12, though. I do have to admit that. But, I look at the Big 12. I think Oklahoma State's better than any team in the Pac-12. I still think I know Oklahoma and Texas have had losses, but they're still very talented. I think Iowa State's good, but I think Oklahoma State's probably the Big 12's best bet right now to make the playoff. But I think, if you have a 1-loss Big 12 champion, 1-loss Pac-12 champion, and 1-loss Big 10, I think Big 10 and Big 12 get the nod over the Pac-12.
I like that. As much as I don't like Oklahoma State, but I do respect the program. Phenomenal. Yeah. Mike Gundy's done phenomenal at Oklahoma State.
Yes, he has.
Of course, I want to have to throw this out there. Just kind of curious on your thoughts. Mm-hmm. If Oklahoma's lost to 2 teams already. They started the season 1 and 2, worst time since 1990. 99, they lost back-to-back. 98, worst start since then. If Oklahoma was to win out, and that includes beating TCU on the road, Texas Tech, and finishing out the November into December, could we see? Now, of course, everything else, they would have to absolutely have miracles upon miracles, and ahead of them would have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
If Oklahoma happens to go win out the Big 12 and the Pac-12 Big 10 has some issues to where they can't complete the rest of the season, or not so much that, just maybe the Big 10 Pac-12 has 2 losses.
Yep.
Could Oklahoma theoretically still make the playoff, or do you think because of their losses to Iowa State, who lost to I think it was still pretty decent Louisiana team, and Kansas State losing to Arkansas State, which that is a tough one. Do you think that's going to hold them back once it's all said and done?
No, if all that falls into place, like you said, if they have a lot of help with other teams getting 2 losses, Oklahoma's still one of the most talented teams in the country. I mean, you can just watch them on film and see that. I mean, Spencer Rattler is an unbelievable talent for a young freshman. Lincoln Riley is one of the best offensive minds in all of football, not just college football. So, no, I think absolutely. And I think the committee takes into effect how you're playing from middle to the end of the year, too. I mean, those 2 losses were early in the year. If they can play a full schedule and get through it and have no issues with COVID or anything and have 2 losses, but like Ohio State or a Big Ten team or Pac-12 team can't finish their season, absolutely, I think they can get a nod in the into the college football playoff if they go undefeated the rest of the way and win the Big 12.
Of course, I'm gonna say this. I think easily Spencer Rattler, by far, very young talent. Hopefully, he can progress throughout the rest of the season, of course, and into the 21-22 season. We talk coaching, of course. Nowadays, coaches, it's cutthroat business. Could we see Urban Meyer back on the sideline, or do you think he's solidified? Because where I'm going with this is rumors that the Texas fans want him. Tom Herman, they want him out. Of course, Tom Herman on the hot seat, which is rightfully so, probably for Texas. Could we see Urban Meyer coach a game 1? And if right, would he be a good fit at the University of Texas?
I think we will see Urban coach again. I don't know how soon, but I definitely don't think he's retired for good. He just likes to take breaks for his health. Understandable.
Of course.
But one job I've always thought he would be a good fit at, and it's not Texas. I've never thought about him fitting in Texas. He just doesn't seem like a Big 12 guy to me, but he has been to SEC and Big 10 already. I've always thought USC would be an interesting fit if that job came open. But I definitely think we will see him back coaching, and eventually it will be in college football, not the NFL.
I like that pick. I like the USC pick. I don't see him. I'm like you. I don't see him at Texas. His style does not fit the Big 12. Of course, the Big 12, as people may know, does not play defense, and we'll talk defense. The SEC, which is the one that loves to make fun of, especially for Oklahoma, loves to make fun of teams that with no defense. Don't know how many games you watched this year. I know I've tried to catch as many as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the fact, and it's a good kind of conversation, do you think, in your opinion, I know on mine, I think a lot has to do with COVID, people trying to avoid it as much as possible during practice, less hitting, so on and so forth. Any reasons, or they could be young. Question, I guess, is any idea of why a lot of teams score a lot of points, especially in the SEC, which is known for defense galore? Defense are averaging, I know USC. I know that Ole Miss scored 48 on Alabama. Of course, Arkansas can score some points. Do you think it's just because of the fact that this year is just everything's all out of whack, that a lot of players are just, I guess, conditioned right, or could this actually be a downfall for the SEC in regards to defenses that should be so young?
I think it's got a combination of both. I think it's probably definitely just the unique year we're in, and some players not as conditioned, and some players, honestly, I think it's going to be tough too, especially in the Big Ten. I'm not switching gears here, but the Big Ten, where they're not having any fans come in, it's going to be tough for a coach to get an 18 to 22-year-old pumped up sometimes for these games without fans. It's going to be a unique challenge for some of these coaches. And I think the SEC, that's a challenge too, even though they're having fans. They're just not a sold-out stadium like they're used to. So at times I think some of these kids probably quit on plays when they normally wouldn't, or maybe they're not as hyped up and ready to go into games as they normally would be. But I also think it's just a combination of some of these new coaches in the SEC. The Lane Kiffin, bringing a new style into Ole Miss. Of course, everybody was pumped up with Mike Leach's offense and with what Costello did at LSU week 1, but they've really tampered off the last couple of weeks. I don't know what's going on there. Besides turnovers, it seems like the SEC's already figured out his playbook. I don't know. But then I think Pittman's he's doing one of the better coaching jobs in the country right now at Arkansas. I didn't think they would be near this good, this quick. So I think it's got combinations of just some new faces and some new styles, and just the fact, like you said, so maybe some players aren't as well conditioned as they could be, and really a lot of these players are missing the non-conference games they usually play, especially at least when Alabama's concerned. Actually, the SEC as a whole, their non-conference schedule is pretty much a joke usually. So they play these cupcake teams, and they can get their reps and experience and their feet wet before going into conference season. And this year, that's just not the case. So, so it's definitely a down year for the defenses in the SEC, but it's hard to pinpoint exactly why.
Yeah, and of course, excuse me, and then it's and Mike Leach, of course, Mike Leach. Phenomenal coach, especially on the offensive side. It seems like wherever he goes, he succeeds. It took him a while at Washington State. Of course, Texas Tech, he did pretty all right, pretty decent for what the conference was. Of course, he got stuck when Texas and Oklahoma was, a lot better than obviously within Texas, obviously, is right now. But the SEC, I'm kind of curious. Florida, of course, is real good if they can get back on the field, so on and so forth. Last question before we switch gears, if I can talk. Switch gears to the NFL. You're early heading into the Big Ten season this weekend. Your 4 predictions headed into the Big Ten season. What are your top 4 storylines, and then your early college football predictions?
Sure, I think Big Ten storylines. Oh, this is a good one because you can go all over the place. But of course, number one, I think it's Ohio State. They were pretty close to beating Clemson last year in the college football playoff. I think the Big Ten thinks Ohio State's the real deal this year, and that's why, of course, another reason they're really pushing to get football back. So they think they can get them to the college football playoff and get that nice little extra revenue for everybody in the conference. So I think they're definitely a big headline. You brought up Jim Harbaugh. I think it's a big year for him. So he's in the headlines. I mean, can he finally get over the hump and beat the Buckeyes? That's just a huge thing up in Ann Arbor that they haven't been able to do. One headline for me is PJ Fleck in Minnesota. He had that great year last year, 10 wins, beat Auburn in the Outback Bowl. Now what can he do with expectations for once? He lost some talent in Tyler Johnson and Antoine Winfield, who both play in Tampa Bay for the Buccaneers now. But he got, like I said, he's got Tanner Morgan back. He's got Bateman back. He's got some other talent around his team up there. So can they contend for the West and do well with expectations on that program for once? And I think the other storyline, like kind of headline is, actually I'll do a combination of 2 here because I don't know which one I want to go to the other. But you got new coaches in Greg Schiano and Mel Tucker. At Michigan State, Mel Tucker's getting paid top 15 head coach money in the country after only being a 1-year head coach at Colorado. So I don't expect a lot of Spartans this year, but I think he will be a good recruiter as years are to come. And it'll be interesting to see if he can get that program back to where Mark D'Antonio had them at one time. And Greg Schiano at Rutgers, it'll be interesting to see what he can do. I mean, he went 68 and 67, which doesn't seem great in a decade span when he was the head coach there, but that was a heck of a lot better than anything they've had since. And then also I keep an eye on Iowa to see if they can keep their locker room in check because they've had a lot of distractions in this offseason with allegations and different things. And some more allegations actually just got brought up within the last week. So it'll be interesting to see if Kirk Ferentz can keep everything kind of in-house and on a good plane up there because if not, this could be Ferentz's last year. And I know a lot of fans in Big Ten country, or I guess I should say a lot of Iowa fans, they have the name of your old ball coach Bob Stoops. That's who they want to be the replacement once Ferentz is done there. So,
well, I'm glad you brought that up. Not to go on a side, I know we were going to change subject real quick, but PJ Fleck and Kirk Ferentz. Of course, I was going to ask you that earlier. I'm glad you brought them up. PJ Fleck, of course, done a phenomenal job at Central Michigan. Of course, I thought he's done a pretty decent job at Minnesota.
He's done a lot better than I ever expected him to do this fast.
Absolutely. I'll be honest with you, and I hope one day he listens to this, and I will own up to what I say. I thought he took it for the money, and that was it.
Yep, and I still
his son at Central Michigan, and that was going to be it.
I even though he signed a contract extension, I still think, and I don't care if he listens to this because on my podcast I'm vocal. He is my least favorite coach in the Big Ten, even though I think he's a great coach. I'm not all for his shtick, but I still think he's using this job as a stepping stone for a bigger job. if Texas came open, maybe he's a fit down there. It'd be interesting to see if Stick could go down there, but I think he is still destined for a bigger job than Minnesota eventually.
And that's actually my next question was, do you think is this a stepping stool? Of course, like I said, I thought he did phenomenal compared to what I had him as. I'm like, okay, you got another MAC guy, and he's going to get his money, and he's going to get fired in 3-4 years, and they're going to move on.
Well, a lot of people forget he took over a Minnesota team that went 9-4 the year before with Tracy Claeys, who did a fine job. He just kind of got bullied into being fired. It was kind of a raw deal. He got so PJ took over a pretty good program. He wasn't like he was taking over a team like Jeff Brom took over Darrell Hazel-led team that won 9 games in 4 years and was just a dumpster fire of dumpster fires as far as the head coach hiring. But yeah, I still think so. PJ's done well. I'll give him credit, but I still think he's using this job to get a bigger job down the road.
And Kirk, of course, as far as I know, the longest tenure coach at a program.
Yes, he is. You're correct.
I could be wrong. How much he's done great for how long he's been there, but realistically for the Iowa program, how much longer do you think until they can finally just say we've got to make a different scenario? Nothing personal, Kirk. You've done phenomenal, but we've got to absolutely eventually get a different face for this program.
Next 3 years or so, I think. But Iowa fans better be careful because they might just promote his son, who's the offensive coordinator, to be the head coach. I mean, but if I was Iowa fans, I'd want to just get a new face in there for a whole new culture. And like I said, a lot of them think good old Bob Stoops would come back, but I don't know if Bob would take the Iowa job or not. I don't know. That's quite a step down from Oklahoma. Iowa's a good program, don't get me wrong, but they're no Oklahoma. So,
and you never know. He may want to, officially end his career. I know he took Dallas Renegades XFL thingamabob. I think I kind of like to talk to Bob and say, "Hey, why did you do this?" I'm kind of curious. But anyway, I don't think that ruins his legacy. But no, it'd be kind of interesting. I know he's no kid himself, but I've heard his tequila business is doing well, so you never know.
Hey, and he did play. I mean, that's his alumni right there, Iowa. Yeah. So that's always a strong tie. I mean, I remember going through the Jeff Brom to Louisville possibility 2 years ago when I was on Pins and Needles reading every report that was coming in because I was convinced he was leaving our program and going to Louisville. Thankfully, he turned him down, and Purdue ponied up and gave him a ton of money. But I mean, it's got to be tough to turn down your alma mater. That's got to be really hard.
You never know. I'm sure Bob's a smart guy. He'll definitely program-wise, nothing compared to Oklahoma. But maybe, maybe if that time comes and if he was to be offered, knowing it's less pressure, I mean, you never know. He may for 3-4 years and ride off in the sunset.
That's true. He definitely could. And I know I want to answer your other question you had for me before we switch gears and talk some NFL. You wanted my early four
yes.
playoff prediction. I will go Clemson and Alabama. I will go Ohio State, even though I don't like that because I'm sick of Ohio State as a Big Ten fan, but they are just good year in and year out. This is where it gets tricky for me because I think Notre Dame loses 2 games. If they would only lose 1 game, maybe they're in the conversation, but I think they'll lose to Clemson and North Carolina. I think Miami could run the table, but then lose to Clemson again, which would give them 2 losses. I don't know what Oklahoma State's remaining schedule looks like. In the Pac-12 just plays so little games. I don't want to take Pac-12 team, so I'm going to take Oklahoma State as my 4th, but I'm not real confident in that pick.
Yeah, I don't either know. I don't have Oklahoma State right in front of me. I do know that they have Iowa State this week in Stillwater. I do know that. It's on Fox. Yep, watching that right after the Oklahoma TCU game. But you never know. I mean, this is a huge game for both Oklahoma State, of course, OSU. They're the cream of the crop right now, the Big 12. I mean, practically that's the Big 12's last hope, in my opinion, at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment it definitely is too. They need some help if anybody else is going to have a chance.
And, of course, Iowa State, they have OSU's number. And so –
Campbell's the upset specialist. He is the upset specialist. his teams are tough to figure out. They'll beat teams when they're not supposed to, but then they'll lose a clunker to like Lafayette. Louisiana Lafayette's a fine team. The Raging Cajuns, they're a pretty solid little team, but that's a game that Iowa State's got to take care of business week 1, but didn't do it.
Now, I thought, headed into the season, I thought, I know Louisville. I know Louisiana can definitely compete with the Sun Belt with Appalachian State, but if you would have told me that, hey, they're going to go up there and practically wallop Iowa State, I would be like, yeah, good job. You guys, good prediction, because that was not going to happen. But
and I got to ask, since you're a Big 12 fan, and I think I know the answer to this, but what's everybody's opinion of Kansas?
Just like Rutgers. Why the hell are they in here? Now, the Kansas, I'm going to say this. Mark Mangino was a mistake. I don't condone what he did at Kansas at all. I don't. But they've probably 100 times over regret firing him because, Mark Mangino had Kansas in the Orange Bowl. I think they beat Virginia Tech.
You're right. Mm-hmm.
Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl. They had that program going. Of course, he got stuck with the good Chase Daniel Missouri teams and the good Nebraska teams. I still think Mark Mangino beat Nebraska once or twice before he got fired. But again, I'm just going to be honest. Big 12, I kind of wish there was a way we can just eliminate Kansas from football. Of course, basketball, that's what they're known for.
Sure.
But I don't know about Les Miles. His $2.7 million's gotten really nowhere. He's lost now back-to-back years to Coastal Carolina. They're not even competitive this year now with Buki or Muka, whatever his name is. The star running back, he's opted out, and which I respect his decision. His mom's health declining and all that, so I get that. That's perfectly fine. But Kansas is bad. They've gotten a lot worse, and I think that they've got to be one of the worst FBS teams.
Yeah, that's kind of the response I was looking for and thinking you were going to say. But I agree. Yeah, they should have never hired or fired, even though I don't condone what he did either. But Mangino was doing a good job there. And then I don't recall the guy's name they hired from Buffalo, but they only gave him 2 years.
Turner Gill.
Turner Gill, yep, thank you. And then they gave him the axe, which I know he didn't do great, but I thought 2 years was not enough time to try to get that thing going again. But, and the Les Miles thing was just, I think, more for some press and publicity than anything else. But I do know they've put some money into their football facilities, but Chris Harris Jr. and Aqib Talib aren't walking through those doors anytime soon to re-up for the Jayhawks. So, unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be good anytime soon.
No, and I got a buddy of mine since second grade. He's a diehard Jayhawk fan, and that poor guy, I'm so glad that the Chiefs won for him because this guy – I'll give him credit. He's a solid Jayhawk fan, regardless of how horrible that they are on the football field. But they're bad. They're just really bad. Of course,
not good.
They're god awful. And maybe one day that they'll get back up there. But right now, Kansas is our Rutgers in the Big Ten. And
I feel your pain.
Hey, I'll give the Sun Belt credit. They swept the Big 12, so good job.
That's something they need to be proud to hang their hat on. That's pretty cool for small conference.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not even at all knocking them. The Sun Belt really should make a trophy and say, hey, we swept the Big 12 or something. I don't know. But hey, it is what it is. Switching gears to the NFL. I don't know where to begin on this one. Let's go with the New York Jets.
Oh, my God.
A buddy of mine, he does a podcast. I was on it a while back. The question, and we kind of talked about, I may kind of get your input. Presuming the Jets lose out, which there's a very good chance of that. They go 0-16, 0-14, depends on how the season finishes out. And they're sitting at the number one spot. The question that Dan brought up was, if you're the Jets, do you trade Sam Darnold? What team – to who, first of all? Second one is, do you then go after Trevor Lawrence, or do you think Trevor Lawrence is going to be like an Eli Manning and practically say, I'm not going to go to the Jets, and practically want to play for somebody else?
To answer your question, yes, I do think you trade Sam Darnold, and yes, you do get Trevor Lawrence. From everything I've read about Trevor, he seems like a pretty humble kid. Said he grew up not really having a favorite NFL team. He said if he had to pick one, it would probably be the Falcons. So he doesn't seem like a guy who would want to sit out based on the team that's going to draft him, but I guess you never know. But, I think he's a once-in-a-lifetime type of talent that can fall into your lap, kind of like Andrew Luck was looked at coming out of college, Peyton Manning, John Elway, once in every 20 years or so. I do think if the Jets go 0-16 or even don't go 0-16 but get the number one pick, I think that's the move they got to make. I mean, Darnold still could have a good future left in him, but I don't think it's going to be Trevor Lawrence worthy. And three teams I got in mind that could potentially be good suitors for him: Indianapolis Colts. I think Phillip Rivers is only a 1-year deal. Yep. He's old, he's losing it. He just is what he is. I mean, I think they thought they could, and then they're 4-2, they're doing fine, but they thought they could just win by him not turning over the ball and playing good defense in the run game. Well, he has turned over the ball too much, and that's why they have 2 losses. But so I think that could be a fit because Brissett's going to be a free agent. I don't think they think Jacob Eason's the future, even though they took him in the draft. Chicago Bears are another one to keep an eye on. Mitchell Trubisky's pretty much done there, and Nick Foles, he is what he is. I mean, he's a starter right now, but let's be honest, he's better when he's a backup and comes into the game. The Bears have been looking for a good quarterback pretty much the whole existence of their franchise. I mean, talent-wise, Jay Cutler is probably the best they've ever had, but you and I as Bronco fans know he's got nothing between the years, so it doesn't matter. That's just a franchise that's never really had a good quarterback, so they don't know what good quarterback play is. Watch out for the Saints. I think this is Drew Brees' last year, and as a diehard Purdue fan, that pains me to say. I hate to see him slipping a little bit, but Father Time, holding no mercy, and when he strikes hard. And I know they do have Jameis as a backup. I guess they could roll with Jameis and extend his contract, but I don't know if you want a quarterback that throws about 30 interceptions a year. So Sam Darnold might be a more safe bet down there because Tyson Hill, he's an interesting prospect, but he's more of a hybrid instead of a quarterback. He is what I think Tim Tebow should have turned into, but Tim wanted to be quarterback. So those are the 3 teams I would keep an eye on if the Jets do get number 1 pick, want to roll with Trevor Lawrence, and decide to get rid of Darnold.
Absolutely. And of course, when we kind of get our conversations, it's kind of heated. And a buddy of mine, Kyle, I love these guys to death. They're more like brothers, but Kyle is not very fond of my idea in regards to the Denver Broncos. We'll continue talking quarterbacks here in Denver. And, of course, I'm a huge Drew Lock fan. I love Drew Lock. But realistically, of course, we have to be honest at the same time is he's been hard of the He hasn't been on the field much. Went 4-1 last year. Looked phenomenal. Of course, the Chiefs game, which a lot of people still roast us over, which I don't get because, let's be honest, the Chiefs were way above Denver last year and still are. Of course, it's blizzard conditions, but anyway, whatever. Do you think Denver still sticks with Drew Lock even after, let's just say this year, probably next? Do you really think he's the franchise quarterback, 1? And 2, a conversation was brought up that they think Aaron Rodgers could be traded because of Jordan Love. Do you think Denver and John Elway could do it easily what they did with Peyton Manning, except for obviously not trade for him? But do you see Aaron Rodgers being a Denver option if he happens to be either traded or a free agent?
Well, that's an interesting scenario. I'm a big Drew Lock fan too, and I think he's only going to continue to get better. He's still kind of like a rookie. I know it's the second year, but he just hasn't had too many games under his belt. And hopefully he's learned from his injuries maybe to stay in the pocket a little more, even though I love his playmaking ability.
Oh, yes.
So I do think he is their future. I hope Broncos country can be more patient. It's kind of ticking me off that a lot of Broncos country, we got so spoiled with the Peyton Manning years and just have not had good quarterback play really ever since, and we're starving for it. But they just got to be patient with the kid. I think he's going to continue to get better. I thought he actually looked pretty good Sunday besides those 2 interceptions. And I know statistically speaking, it wasn't the best, but he also had 3 or 4 drops that could have been touchdowns. So, but if Aaron Rodgers is out there, that's a unique opportunity. I think one John would look at, but we got to be careful. We got to see where John's head's at too, because John's contract, I believe, is up after next year.
I believe it is, yeah.
So it just depends if he wants to keep going or not. You know, the Broncos have such an ownership mess right now with some legal stuff with the Bolin family going on, and we really got to hope that plays out sooner than later, because that will be that's a headache they got to get figured out. But I think that's something John would entertain. But if he wants to go another 4 years after his contract expires of being the GM, I think he'd be smart to still roll with Drew Lock if that's the guy he wants, because Aaron Rodgers is going to be winding down too. And whenever Father Time hits him, even though he's having a spectacular year this year, whenever Father Time hits him, he's got to hit hard. And who knows, Green Bay might keep on to him for 3 or 4 more years and make Love wait like they made Rodgers wait for Favre. So.
Well, absolutely. And, I've seen Jordan Love not in person at Utah State. I think he could be a quarterback. I was a little surprised that Green Bay went that route. And again, we can't knock Jordan Love, what we don't know, what we can't see. But I'm like you in regards to the Broncos country. Be patient. I like Drew Lock. I think he is the future. And again, when he got to be on the field more. And I thought he played decent on Sunday for what was given. And a lot of people, Broncos country, which I'm a little like you, I'm getting frustrated with this. Let's be honest, we've dealt with a lot of injuries. So many injuries. At this point, I don't know who's out at this point. But when you lose Sutton, of course, on offense, on the receiving, KJ Hamler, of course, he's been out from week at times, and Noah Fant's out for a while, and the running game with Melvin Gordon. Which, by the way, do you think the league's going to get involved with Melvin Gordon?
Yeah, I think they have to, legally wise, with a DUI. Usually the normal suspension is 3 games. So I think that's coming sooner. It's pretty soon. I don't know when, but yeah, unfortunately that was just a dumb decision on his part. Should have known better. You're an NFL football player. Be more responsible. Call an Uber. And the frustrating part is they had 4 days off, and you do it the day before you have to go back to work. That's just not very smart thinking. But hey, Philip Lindsay looked great Sunday, so I'm proud of him. Hometown boy.
Great. Yes. And of course, Kyle, I hope he does listen to this. So my prediction in front of before the season started was 11-5 for Denver, but not winning the division, rightfully so.
Sure.
Do you think that was too? Because Kyle think that was too high. Do you think that was too high of expectations, knowing what we did know, what we saw in Drew Lock last year? Of course, the free agency, I thought we did pretty well. Getting Glasgow on the offensive line, AJ Bouye in the secondary, so on and so forth, and of course the draft, which I think is one of Elway's probably better ones that he's had, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Do you think 11-5 was too high entering the season?
I predicted them, I believe, 9-7. And I thought their ceiling was 10-6, so I wasn't that far behind you. But I think 11-5 probably was a little stretch. But I get it. We a lot of us in Bronco country, we drink the orange and blue Kool-Aid, or have orange and blue shades on. I fall for it every year. I mean, that's just good fans, right? That's good fans. So, I just didn't. I like the way they finished last year, 4-1, but I just knew. I knew Kansas City was still a team to beat, and still are right now in the AFC West, and probably will be for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. But I just didn't really know what to expect. I thought the offense could be explosive, but I knew the offense was going to be young. I mean, Cortland Sutton, your number 1 wide receiver, is entering only his 3rd year. Jerry Jeudy, a rookie. KJ Hamler, a rookie. Noah Fant, 2nd year. Some makeshift new offensive line. So I didn't really know what to expect. So I think that's why I kind of safely went 9-7 with a ceiling of 10-6. But I still think this team and franchise has such a bright future, but we just got to be patient for everything to fall into place.
Be patient, and we got to be healthy, which, of course,
exactly.
Vaughn Miller, that was a fluke thing. That was a fluke. I mean, that was as fluke as you could get. And then, of course, COVID, and then everything else bottomed out. So I still think we're going to win a lot of games in the near future. Future's still bright. I'm sure we've got to be one of the youngest in the league.
We are the youngest on offense in the whole league, average age. Melvin Gordon's the oldest at the age of 28, I believe, for starters. So, yep.
Last question of Denver, and then we definitely will talk some NFL. Do you think Garrett Bowles gets traded or released at the end of the season?
You know, if Garrett Bowles continues to play like he is right now, he better be a Denver Bronco for the next couple of years. And I was a guy that ripped Garrett Bowles so much the last couple of years on my podcast. I wouldn't even refer to him as Garrett Bowles. I would call him number 72. I called him Kevin Dandino on the Orange Weekly podcast I do the post game with. He used to call him Gumballs because he would just hold on to people. We had a lot of names for him, but it wasn't Garrett Bowles. But I will eat crow, and Garrett has played very well this year.
Yes,
I think he's been the Broncos' most reliable offensive lineman. I don't know if he's just learned a lot technique-wise from Mike Munchak, or if it's not having fans there, because I think when he gets called for 3 or 4 holds, the fans get on him so bad he probably loses his confidence, or the fact that the NFL is not calling holding penalties as often as they have in years past. I don't really know what to contribute to that, but I am happy that Garrett Bowles is playing the way he is. So if he continues to play like this, I hope he's a member of the Denver Broncos for a little while.
Oh, absolutely. And I thought he's done phenomenal this year. I was kind of curious. I was hoping that maybe I wasn't just daydreaming over here, and was hoping that we see Jawan James, last one for Denver. Jawan James, what do you think of this guy? I mean, I know COVID was his opt-out, but do you think is he even going to play? Is he going to start at this point?
Waste of money. And one of my guys I do the TNJ Man show with, he's a big Dolphin fan. He warned me right when we signed him. He goes, "Dude's made of glass." He said, "Be careful what you signed." And I'm like, whatever. You're just saying that because he went to Denver. And then we got a game and a half out of him so far. At the end of the season, it'll be a game and a half, and we're paying him league high for a right tackle, or at least at the time was. Maybe he's not now, but just think a waste of money, and he's not going to get any younger. And if we got younger guys who can play the position just as good, if not just a little worse, play those guys. I don't know. I just think it was a bad contract looking back on it.
Absolutely. Of course, Las Vegas, Justin Herbert, your impressions on Herbert, and what does he look? Do you think it's Herbert time moving forward, of course, from not just this season, but from here on out?
Yeah, I think Herbert is the dude for LA for a long time. It's frustrating as a Bronco fan to see that. All right, the Chiefs are set for a long, long time with Mahomes. Now Herbert's set. Actually, I think that puts some pressure on Drew Lock to make sure he's the guy in Denver. I don't think Vegas is sold completely yet on Derek Carr. I mean, Carr's an okay quarterback. He won't make you a ton of mistakes, but he won't go out there and win you tons of games either. I don't know if Gruden's completely sold on him, because there was, that rumor a few years ago that they were going to try to get Kyler Murray. That didn't happen, of course. He fell to the Cardinals. But, I think Herbert's already better than I thought he would be as a rookie. I didn't know he could throw the deep ball so well. I mean, I watched him at Oregon. I just don't remember his deep ball being so well. And I think John Elway was a little frustrated that Herbert came back to college last year, because if he would have came out 2 years ago, I think we would see Herbert on the Broncos roster, because Elway fell in love with him, and I think he would have made a move to go get him. But it is what it is, and good for Charger fans, even though I don't know any Charger fans. I don't even know if they have fans, because they never showed up.
Well, they're not at the games.
Yeah, they're not at the games and never really have been at the games. So, but no, I do think they found their quarterback of the future, but that's just kind of frustrating from a Broncos standpoint.
It is, and the AFC West is going to be, if Drew Lock can do what we think he can, I think he will, this AFC West quarterback and just talent-wise is going to be probably the toughest divisions in the league, because, I mean, Herbert can obviously – we've seen what he can do. Well, we all know what Mahomes can do. And Locke, I think he can be in between those two. But we overlook who's your surprise team so far in regards to how the season has played out. And in regards to Dallas, of course, Dak Prescott took a really nasty injury. Of course, he's out for the remainder of the year. Of course, contract year for Dak. I still think they overpaid Zeke. Do you still see Dallas going after Dak, or is Dak going somewhere else after this season officially ends?
Well, to answer your first question, surprise teams, I got a couple. One of them is probably one that people are going to be like, really? Why are you picking them? They're 3-3. But one of them is the Carolina Panthers, and that's because I thought they might win 2 or 3 games all year. And I thought Matt Rule was a bad decision. I thought he did great at Temple. He did great at Baylor, but I'm like, he's not an NFL head coach. But he's proven me wrong. He knows what he's doing, and they're winning all these games without, in my opinion, the best running back in the NFL, Christian McCaffrey, which is really a head scratcher. I don't know how that's happening, but I think they're a surprise team. This other team, I had high expectations, but then I tampered my expectations because of the injuries, and that was San Francisco. But I think they're playing really well right now, considering all the injuries. But we shouldn't be surprised because John Lynch is a good GM, and Kyle Shanahan is one of my favorite head coaches in the NFL, and I still wish Elway would have hired him over Vance Joseph. But that's a conversation for another day. And then my third surprise, well, actually it's 2 teams, the Titans and the Steelers. I both thought they would be good, but I didn't think they'd be this good. Vrabel's just a good coach. Derrick Henry's just a beast. And Tannehill's the perfect quarterback for that team. He doesn't have to do a whole lot. And I think the Titans are going to be good for years to come. And the Steelers, that defense is just downright nasty. I didn't expect them to be as good as they are. And Chase Claypool is now, him and Juju are going to be threats for the Steelers for years to come. So, I think all 4 of those teams are kind of surprises for me. And then as Dallas goes, man, what a tough situation for Dak Prescott, kind of betting on himself, turning down a bunch of money, then having that horrific ankle injury that thankfully for him, it looks like he will be back in about 6 months recovery time. So it's not as bad as it could have been. But I actually do think he will be back as the Cowboys quarterback for the future. I think they will get something done, especially if Andy Dalton and company can't get anything going forward. That just proves to you that Dak was really that valuable to the team.
Absolutely. And I guess my surprise team was, I think one is definitely Pittsburgh, just for the simple fact that I thought this is Mike Tomlin's do or die year. If he can't take this team to the playoffs, or at least get where this team, where this program or organization should be, he's definitely out the door. I think he's done phenomenal. Ben Roethlisberger, probably the healthiest he's been in quite some time. He looks pretty good. Of course, Chase Claypool, the rookie out of Notre Dame, looks to be a stud. And, of course, Juju and that defense, as you mentioned, is absolutely nasty. A little surprised, I guess you would say, so to speak, is Cleveland. Your thoughts on Cleveland, my thoughts on Cleveland, Baker Mayfield, me personally, as much as he's a Sooner fan, but, hey, as my dad would always say, they moved on. They're in the NFL now. They're no longer a Sooner, Husker, whatever the case may be. Baker Mayfield, is he – I think his contract's up after next season, I believe.
Yeah, he's got a 3-year rookie contract or 4-year rookie contract. Yeah.
Could we see Cleveland eventually draft a quarterback this year or even next year? Or in 21 draft or 22 draft, is he the answer for Cleveland? Because it looks like to me he had a great rookie season, and since then, let's just be honest, he's been a Cleveland quarterback that we all see.
Well, it's a good question. I think the media is a little hard on Baker, to be honest. I know he had a great career at Oklahoma, Heisman Trophy winner, #1 draft pick, so some of that comes with that territory. But he had a bad game last week. I get that against that Steeler defense that, like we said, is just nasty. And they'll do that to about any quarterback. But I thought Cam Newton played bad against the Broncos D. That's getting better and better. And Cam Newton doesn't get hit by the media at all. All the media wants to do is make excuses for Belichick, Josh McDouche, excuse my language, but I can't call him McDaniels.
I can't stand him.
And the Patriots, they just make excuses for them, and Cam's not getting the blame. So I think Baker kind of gets hit on from the media. I still think the Browns are a very talented team, and I think they got a good shot sneaking into the playoffs this year. But Baker's in a tough position. He's got to make sure OBJ and Jarvis Landry, two of the more prima donna divas in the whole league, are happy at all times. If not, they're going to complain to him. I mean, OBJ came out today and said he's tired of being Mr. Nice Guy and trying to be a liked guy, and he's going to be who he is. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, here we go. The locker room's going to blow up again. So, but I do think Baker needs to get them to the playoffs either this year or next year to be the guy going forward.
Bray, I don't know if this is legit. I'm hoping a buddy of mine's trending is trolling me. But just so you know that supposedly Las Vegas is talking to Atlanta about potentially trading for Julio Jones.
Wow. I did hear some rumors today that I read an article that was saying could Matt Ryan and Julio be on the move. I don't know if that meant like soon or after the year. And one guy thought Matt Ryan would be a good fit in San Francisco, and the other guy thought Julio would be a good fit in Green Bay. But if Vegas does get Julio, that makes them yeah. I mean, they got talent. They beat Kansas City 2 weeks ago, which none of us saw coming, and they got some speed with Ruggs already there, and a few other guys. So yeah, Julio could be pretty good there. I hope that's false. I hope your buddy's trolling you.
I do too. Of course, we're finished out here. A few more teams. Texans. Bill O'Brien out, the general manager. Of course, he was GM, head coach, and practically ruined the organization at this point. Where does the Texans? Any candidates you think could fit what Houston's trying to do with that organization? I know, of course, college coaches wise, Lincoln Riley, of course, is always mentioned along with a few others. College coaches haven't really fared off too well in the NFL, so to speak. Who would be your top choice? Any surprisers? And then also any coaches that, in your opinion, that is on a hot seat as of right now through week 6 as we head into week 7?
Yeah, I think if you're at Houston, if you want an offensive coach, and his name is escaping me right now, it's driving me nuts. The offense coordinator for Kansas City.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know why his name is escaping me. I could usually tell you right away, but I mean, he's been rumored for jobs for years, for the last 2 or 3 years. So I think he's got to be up there towards the top of the list. I mean, it was time for Bill O'Brien to go. I'm surprised they did it this early in the season, but I thought maybe they'd strip him of his GM duties first and then his head coaching duties later. But they decided I just don't think he was a good fit anymore. I think he was a jerk, and the players just didn't like him anymore. But I think it's just bugging me that I can't remember his name. I think
it's Eric B.
Benamy.
Yes.
Something. Yeah. I think he would be a good option for Houston. The offense coordinator in New England, I'm not going to mention by name. I know his name, but I'm just not going to mention it by name because I can't stand him like we talked. See, he's an interesting one because I feel like he's had opportunities to be head coach the last couple of years, and he turned them down. Heck, he was the Colts coach for like 12 hours. And then they actually, and of course, living in Indiana, I have tons of friends that are Colts fans, and I told every one of them, I said, you guys that was a blessing in disguise that he turned you guys down.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because you're going to be, and they were with Frank Reich was a lot better fit. So I don't know if he becomes a head coach again. Interesting name to watch in the college ranks. I don't think he would take the job because he's really well suited where he's at, but he did coach Deshaun Watson in college, and that's Dabo Swinney from Clemson. Especially if Clemson was to win another title, what else is there left for him to do there? The Texans could shell him a lot of money, but I still think he stays at Clemson. But that's an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Do you think? Could you see Greg Roman being mentioned, the Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think that's absolutely. I think the Texans will probably hire a NFL coordinator, offense coordinator, if they're smart, and either one of those two guys I think would be good fits. And as far as coaches on the hot seat, well, Adam Gase is a goner. We all know that.
Oh, yes.
I honestly think they're keeping on to him because they know he's so terrible that if they let him go and promote somebody else might actually accidentally win a few games and take them out of the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes. I think they are, but with trading Le'Veon Bell and a couple of other pieces, I think they really are tanking for Trevor. But Gase he will never be head coach again in the NFL. He's pretty much proven that he's a worthless head coach. Let's see who else. I think Mike Zimmer could be in trouble in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
That Kirk Cousins deal is looking like one of the worst contracts in the NFL, if not in sports. It's just not working out well for anybody. I think Matt Patricia's a goner in Detroit. I think he's the perfect scenario where he's a good defensive coordinator, but not a good head coach. Kind of like Vance Joseph is proving in Arizona right now that he can be a good defensive coordinator, but maybe he just wasn't cut out to be a head coach. So I think those are all kind of the guys to keep an eye on. I think everybody else, for the most part, is pretty safe.
Joe Burrow, I can't stand him. It's not for what he did to Oklahoma. It has nothing to do with it. I just don't think I just don't like his attitude. Do you think he'll succeed? A little quick answer. Do you think he'll succeed in the NFL?
Yeah, I think he's going to be pretty good. He doesn't have much to work with right now in Cincinnati, and his offensive line. If they don't boost that offensive line, though, he's going to get killed and won't play a long NFL career, kind of like the Colts ruined Andrew Luck if they're not careful. So, but I think he'll be pretty good.
And then, of course, I'll end the show on this. Kyle's a big Buffalo Bills fan, and he's big Buffalo. He lives in, I think, Long Island. I could be wrong. He lives in New York. Big old Buffalo Bill fan. What's your thoughts on Buffalo? Josh Allen, obviously he's a real deal. Can Buffalo theoretically win a Super Bowl this year, or are they still a few years out?
I think they're the team to beat in the AFC East, and I think they will be for the next few years. And I think Josh Allen is the real deal, and he's their first franchise guy they've had since Jim Kelly. I don't think they can win the Super Bowl this year. I think they're still a few years away. I think the team coming out of the AFC, to be honest, as painful as it is for me to say yet again, I think it's either going to be Kansas City, Pittsburgh, or possibly Tennessee. But I'd say either Kansas City or Pittsburgh if I was a betting man. And I wouldn't count out Baltimore, but I think Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee are ahead of Baltimore. But I would see Kansas City or Pittsburgh would be my two. And then the NFC, I think Seattle's pretty good, except if they get Antonio Brown, he could blow up the whole locker room, and that might be a mess. The Bears are not as good as their record. They're winning ugly. I don't know how they're doing it. I can't figure out the Rams and their 4-2 record. I can't figure them out at all. The Saints, I would love to see Drew Brees have one more run at it, but I mean they get so unlucky in the playoffs. I mean the Minneapolis Miracle, and then the Vikings beating them in the Superdome last year. I just don't see the Saints doing it. It wouldn't surprise me for Tampa Bay to become the first Super Bowl host to play in the Super Bowl. They're starting to click, unfortunately, and they're pretty good on both sides of the ball. So I think Buffalo's a good team, but I think they're still a couple years away from contending for a Super Bowl.
Well, I'll have to let Kyle know. Listen to the show, and then he'll that it's that the NFL is real big, and I love giving Kyle. Of course, he's a Bills fan. Of course, he says that we're going to get romped by him, and that's perfectly fine. If Denver does, then we do. But on this last question, I just got a text. Pete Carroll, with his age, how much longer do you think he can coach? And then last but not least, will Denver ever go back to the traditional uniforms prior to the change regarding to the old logo, which I like the Color Rush logo helmets?
Yeah, I'll answer your Pete Carroll question first, then we'll end on the Denver uniform question. But Pete's getting up there in age, even though he's a guy who looks like he doesn't age, but he is getting up there in age.
Oh, yes.
I see 3 years max, maybe closer to 2 more years. I mean, if they win a title this year, maybe he just retires and goes out on top. But he's been a good fit in Seattle. I didn't know how well he would do after he left USC, where he had all the success there, but left right before they, had all the cheating scandals break down. So he knew what he was doing leaving there. But I only see 2 to 3 more years. But as long as he's there and Russell's there, they're going to be contenders every year. And then as far as the Broncos uniforms are concerned, I like their current uniforms, but I like the Color Rush helmets the best. And I think it is time to tweak the uniforms a little bit. They are starting to use the old Retro D logo a little more on different things. So maybe we do see a combination of that. I would like to see them switch their helmets to the old D. And then I don't think they have to do Color Rush jerseys every week, but I think Nike owes them some other teams have got jersey redesigns. The Broncos haven't since they got Peyton Manning in 2012 when they switched all they really did was switch their primary colors from blue to orange. And then they haven't really been touched since. So I definitely think it's time. And as a guy who buys jerseys and gets excited about uniforms and stuff, that would be pretty exciting if that's to come here soon.
Very nice. And, of course, I just saw that you're an AEW fan. There's a rumor Brock Lesnar is going to AEW.
I would love it.
I would too. I love AEW.
I am a big – I'm actually a pro wrestling fan, but I am all AEW, and WWE's losing me week by week. I hardly watch their product anymore, and the only reason I have the network is so I can watch documentaries and go back and watch the Monday Night Wars and when WCW and Raw were just king, you know. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I don't get to talk about that too often. So, yeah, I was lucky enough to go to an AEW show when they came to Indianapolis last year, and I can't wait till we're all able to go to live wrestling events again because they put on another great show last night. That's a show I got to be in front of my TV from 8 to 10 every Wednesday night for Dynamite. I can't even miss it, even though I do record it just in case. But I love what AEW is doing. I think Tony Khan's a great owner. He makes me even respect the Jaguars a little bit because he's doing a good job with AEW. So I love what they're doing with the future of the industry and so many young, exciting talents. And it's a fun product to watch for sure. So I would be all for Brock Lesnar coming, even if it was just for 2 or 3 appearances, just because that would really tick Vince McMahon off and that would really start the war big time.
I will still say the NWO was the best thing ever happened in pro wrestling for quite a while.
NWO for life.
Oh, yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. I was a big NWO. I was big time. I still, remember Bret Hart and, of course, the Montreal Screwjob and Shawn Michaels and the Attitude with The Rock and of course, Stone Cold. And if you really want to go old school, a lot of people won't know this, but, Triple H originally started out as Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
Yes, sir. Yep. And before that, he was in WCW before that. So.
And Stone Cold actually got there at one point in time.
Yes, he did. And he was in WCW and ECW, and he was stunning Steve Austin. Yep. So, that's oh man, those are good days. Yep, that's the reason I keep the network because the WWE product. I just feel like they are making fun of my intelligence anymore when I watch that product.
It's bad. Oh, it's just bad. All right,
yep,
Tanner, how can these guys find you on social media, Twitter, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at TannerLee18, and both podcasts that I'm a host of, the Tan and J-Man Show and the Boiler Breakdown. You can like both those on Facebook. And, of course, I got Twitter and Instagram for those two. The Tan and J-Man Show's at Tan and J-Man Show. That's on both Instagram and Twitter. And the Boiler Breakdown podcast is Boiler Break Pod on Twitter and Instagram. So the Tan and J-Man Show, I talk me and my co-host talk every Monday night. We're live from 6:30 to 7:30 Eastern time. Not only on all podcast platforms, but also the ISC Sports Network. So it's live on their website, the actual video feed. We talk all kinds of sports, but with a concentration on Big Ten, NFL, and MLB. And then the Boiler Breakdown podcast, try to record once a week during the season. We cover Purdue football and basketball. So if those things interest you, please hit that subscribe button and give us a rating and review. So appreciate it, and I appreciate you having me on, Michael. This has been a blast for the last little over an hour. Really enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely, Tanner. Anytime you feel free to hit me up, and I'll send you my number here after I get off of here. And if OU ever plays Purdue, which I kind of hope we get more Big Ten teams on our schedule. I know we had Ohio State, and we got Michigan, I think in 2 years. But if we ever play Purdue, whether it's a bowl game or we hit up to Big Ten country, I'll hit you up, and I'll have to meet you up there.
Absolutely. If Purdue can get up to the levels of Ohio State and Michigan to where we're playing Oklahoma, count me in, man. Count me in for sure.
Hey, you never know. You never know.
Yep. It just takes a little hot streak for a few years, and the whole program can turn around. So.
Hey, I've seen it happen. Purdue's getting that direction. They just got to get past Ohio State and Wisconsin. I think they might be there. And Penn State's and Coach Franklin's done a well job.
Yep, there's a lot of good teams and good coaches in the Big Ten, and I just want Purdue to win the West one of these years so they can have a chance to win the Big Ten and possibly maybe go to Pasadena, or if they're real lucky, sneak their way into college football playoffs somehow. So, but I love Jeff Brom. I think he's the guy to get them going, and I just hope the team stays healthy this year, and I'm just excited Rondell Moore's back because a few weeks ago I didn't think I was going to see him ever play in a Purdue uniform again when he was opting out for the NFL, which I can't blame him at all. So the fact that he opted back in and I get to watch him for 8 or 9 games, that's pretty exciting to me. So I'm just glad the Big Ten's back, and I'm ready to watch my Boilers take on the Hawkeyes on Saturday.
I'll be watching that game and rooting for you guys as well. And Tanner, as always, you're more than welcome to join me anytime you want, man.
Hey, appreciate it, Michael. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Take care, Tanner. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Have a good one.
You as well.